You are listening to the Loida Lewis podcast, hosted by Loida Nicolas Lewis. She's a trailblazing businesswoman, leader, philanthropist, and the widow of Reginald F. Lewis, the visionary leader who was the first African American to build a billion-dollar company. With unparalleled determination, Loida Lewis has not only excelled as a successful attorney, but also shaped a billion-dollar empire. Following the untimely passing of her husband, Reginald F. Lewis, she took the helm of TLC Beatrice, carving her legacy as a successful business leader. Be inspired and learn from her as she shares her wisdom, the secrets to her success in both business, in love, and in life. Let's live, love, laugh, and learn. With your host, Miss Loida Lewis.
Welcome to the Loida Lewis podcast, and today I have the honor of presenting to you an emergency room doctor, author of the Monsoon Diaries, travel entrepreneur around the world. He is the Chief Medical Officer of the New York City Marathon on the finish line, and most of all, he is a candidate for the New York City Public Advocate. So here he is, Dr. Calvin Sun. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Let's go back to being the emergency doctor of New York City. So can you just tell the audience what it means that you are now an emergency doctor on call?
It's very fitting that we're doing this episode the day after the New York City Marathon. I am this year's lead physician for the finish line 10 of the entire New York City Marathon every year since 2015. I've been given many titles, the chief medical officer or medical captain, and it's symbolic because my entire career was predicated on, ever since residency, I could not choose one hospital to work at. How do I decide which one is the best for me? So I decided to credential to every single hospital system in New York just so I can get an experience of what it's like to work different hospitals around the city in all the boroughs. And that led me to then do all the races and the big events around New York City. And then when the pandemic hit, it also provided me the vantage point of every day being at a different hospitals, and sometimes many different hospitals in a single day, so that I could speak to what was going on during one of the worst times of our city.
Oh my God, the pandemic. I am so glad. I thank God you're still alive. How did you manage to be not a casualty because we didn't know. In 2020, we didn't know what hit us.
I think I'm still a casualty. I have enough nightmares that will last you for the rest of your life. I've lost friends and family and colleagues. My grandmother is widowed because my grandfather died of COVID at Elmhurst Hospital. I've lost nurses and people I've worked with would not show up next day at work. And the survivor's guilt that I lived with has still carried me through to even today when I work a shift. That being said, physically, I look fine. It led to a lot of trauma work and grief counseling. But looking back, I'm still in shock how I've never, what I would say accurately, tested positive for COVID ever during the pandemic and ever since.
Wow. Okay, you're one of those very exceptional person.
I'm sure I've caught it somehow, but I am considered what they call a super dodger.
Super dodger, that's what they call it.
I've already given my DNA or genetic sampling to Rockefeller University to see if that's the case for part of their research for how some people just never catch COVID, but definitely was surrounded by it, so exposed to it, had no protective equipment. I remember wearing the same mask, surgical paper mask, for 17 days straight. It was like my record or something. That was ridiculous, and I'm just grateful to still be alive, but it's not without a couple of scars to carry with.
Yes, it's almost like a survivor's guilt.
I think we all have a little bit of that, and I don't think there has been enough of a reckoning with our society for what happened for the two most impactful years of our lives that we've moved on and don't really talk about anymore.
Yeah, that's true. But being a doctor, that is tough. Can you just give to the people listening on this podcast, how did you decide to be a doctor and emergency doctor at that? Not brain surgeon, not psychiatrist, but emergency doctor, which is you have to be there, aware, and be able to deal with anything that comes through the door.
You want the truth?
Yes.
My dad
Please.
wanted, my. If you want the whole truth, this is the story that goes back to the beginning. My dad wanted me to become a doctor. I didn't, and he pressured me to go through and jump through all the hoops to get there. And in between my sophomore and junior year of college, he died of a sudden heart attack. And it was quick, it was sudden. And I remember walking through the emergency room of the old St. Vincent and realizing not a single doctor or nurse came up to talk to us. And they were just too busy taking care of other emergencies. My mom had enough. She had just been diagnosed with Parkinson's. So she left me to be with her family in Elmhurst. And I went home alone. And I was like, I don't want to be a doctor. And I'm free to make that decision because my mom was like, can't take care of you because I have Parkinson's. You do whatever you want with your life.
And you were a teenager then?
I was 19.
19.
And when I resumed college in junior year, I did a crash application for financial aid. And thank goodness they came in and covered it so I could keep being a college student. But then my last 2 years of college, I swore off to become a doctor. And I was like, I want to live my own life on my own terms. I want to choose that. And whatever I become has to be from my own belief and what I think I can do. And in the 2 years after college, the only job I had fun doing was being a bartender in New York. And I worked at many different jobs around New York, making people happy. And definitely,
bartender means, fixing drinks.
Yeah, mixing cocktails, fixing drinks, making people happy.
Which restaurant or which?
I was at many different ones, multiple gallery openings, Food and Wine magazine.
Starbucks? No.
No, bars. So
bars.
Yeah, Village Poorhouse, Mona Bar, Roadhouse, like college bars, private events, private homes. And I was like, this is great. I love taking care of people. But then I started wondering, what if I'm actually meant to be a doctor this whole time? And I was rebelling against my father for the rest of my life. Because by choosing not to do something, then you're still under his influence. Then he still controls me. But then if I became a doctor, then and he still would win. I didn't know how to choose. Mm-hmm. And then through a series of serendipity, I ended up in Egypt 72 hours later after working a bar shift and meeting this person who dared me to come to Egypt with her. And I ended up in Egypt because I lost the bet. Because I always a man of my word. And I came back from that trip.
What was the bet?
The bet was she wanted me to come with her to Egypt. And I said, no, I'm not into traveling. I'm a born and raised New Yorker. Why pay all that money for the whole world to come to you? I don't understand traveling. Why do people like traveling? And she made fun of me. And then a few hours later, I was like, fine, I'll go if tickets are under $650, $700.
Round trip.
Round trip. I was like, I'll go if tickets are under $700 as a joke. And then we checked it again a few hours after that, and it was $650. And I was like, you know what? That's a good deal. And number two, I'm a man of my word. I did make you a promise, and I'm showing I'm not joking. I'm going to go. So I showed up in Egypt with her, and then she ended up having to return home early because she was on a family trip, and they had some flight issues. So they had to go back early. I ended up spending 3 weeks alone in Egypt, and I came back loving traveling. And it's like, how do I know how to judge something unless I try it out? So I applied that to medical school. How do I know I'm not meant to be a doctor unless I at least apply? And if I don't get in, I wasn't a great student after my dad died. I really struggled to focus. So I don't have great grades. My MCAT score wasn't very high. So if I apply and nobody wants me, then at least I know I did my best. Check that box off and move on with my life.
MCAT is medical examination.
The medical admissions test.
Okay, yeah.
Medical college admissions test.
Anyone who wants to be a doctor out there, you have to study for the MCAT.
That's the irony. I was actually studying for the wrong exam right when he was still alive. I was studying for the GREs, thinking I needed to go to med school.
GREs is for graduate school.
Grad school. And there was one girl sitting next to me in the bus. It's like, you're studying for the wrong test if you want to go to medical school.
Oh my God.
And yeah, that's how hands-off he was. And even after he died, I had no direction. And I had to figure this out for myself. And I think that's the point is I want the decisions to come from me and not from anyone else. So if I were to get rejected everywhere, then I can move on with my life. But then one school took me.
How many schools did you apply to?
26.
26. Oh my God, that's very expensive. That's 200 at least,
Yeah, I
or
bartended
maybe
a
at
lot
that time $50.
There's a lot of bartending shifts that had to pay for that.
Okay.
And
26. See, if you have to go for something, do your best. Apply everywhere.
yeah, just people was like, oh, you were so lucky to get in that one school. And I respond, luck is preparation plus opportunity. I have to do my best.
Okay. Preparation and opportunity. Listen well, please.
And then
That's
one,
luck.
And then one school is like, we really believe in your story. You're very honest. Because even though my grades weren't great, MCAT wasn't up to a standard that is considered acceptable for a med student applicant, I was a good writer. Because I wrote every day. That's something I learned from my father. He kept diaries.
What did your father do that you said, I'll do it too?
He kept diaries. So my father went through a recent divorce before he had me. So I have a brother, different mother, same father. He would write diaries to my brother because he couldn't be there with him because my brother was still in Berkeley. After the divorce, my dad moved to New York where he had me, would still write to my brother, hoping that one day he would read those letters or the diaries. The irony is that after he died, I found those diaries and read all of them. And my brother to this day will not read those diaries.
Oh, wow.
So he wrote to the wrong son, I guess, or he wrote to me through. It's just like that inspired me to write. And therefore, when I applied to med school, I wrote how honest I felt. Like, I can't tell you if I want to go to med school. I can't even just answer that question. But these are the signs that suggest I should still apply. And it was a whole story about when I was volunteering in a hospital as a patient advocate at Bellevue and seeing a patient that reminded me of my father and just told the story.
And being a bartender.
They knew that from my resume. And people really loved that. So to answer your original question, the long story is why did I become an ER doctor? Was because when I finally went through med school and applied to residency, one guy asked me, why do you want to be an ER doctor? And I spoke from the heart. I was like, it is the closest thing to the only job that saved my life when my dad died. And that was bartending. That was the only way I could pay through college. That was the only way I can get to a point where I can travel. And bartending is just like becoming an emergency room doctor.
Yes, you deal with anyone who comes to you and wants a drink.
It's the same patient population. The people who come to the bar are the ones that also come to the emergency room. And just like a bar, in an emergency room, you're behind a row of computers. You have to be ready for anyone who comes through those doors, just like a bar. You got to take care of people as fast as possible because there's so many other people waiting for care or their drink. But you can't move too fast because then people will feel like you're not paying enough attention, just like a bartender. You're not listening to me, or the drink this doesn't taste like what I ordered. But you can't move too slowly either because so many people are waiting for you. And then like the bar manager is like the head of the ER. They don't even do any work anymore. They just go around and like, hey, how are you liking my bar? Or how are you liking my emergency room? Give this guy a Tylenol in the house or a tetanus shot before he goes. It's the same set of skills. It's the same sense of customer service and listening to people. Doctors are very good at listening. They're charged with the most nosy profession in the world. They have to ask you everything. And a bartender has to listen to everything. It's the people that come to the bartender and they complain. The bartender has to be a good listener, even though they know they're never going to see them again, just like an ER doctor, because we don't see our patients ever again.
That's right.
And the person asking that question took off his glasses and said, that was the best answer I've ever heard to that question. You got the job.
Oh, my goodness. Wonderful. Yeah. Yes. So that was out of 26 medical school, you got into one.
All you need is one.
All you need is one. Excellent. Lesson to everybody. If you don't succeed, try and try again. Yeah. All right. So now, so you decided you will be a doctor. You graduated, and what happened then? That now you are emergency doctor for entire New York, but your very first experience as a doctor.
As an attending, right after residency, everyone already had a job. I didn't. Remember, I have everything I do has to feel authentic and right. I'm not going to do something because everyone else is doing it. By then, everyone had lined up a full-time job. They signed contracts with a hospital. And I'm thinking deep down inside, am I crazy? Because it doesn't feel right. How do you know you're supposed to be at that hospital? You only had a 2-hour interview with them. That's like marrying someone after the first date. Like you should take maybe a few days to get to know them or a few weeks. Therefore, I want to work at those hospitals first before I decide. So I credentialed at all the hospital systems. But the very first job I had as an attending after residency training was actually the Bronx 10-mile race.
Oh.
That was interesting because it wasn't a hospital setting. What happened was I also wanted that ability to work at many different hospitals because I get to control my own schedule. So once I started credentialing, I was waiting for my credentials to pass, which takes about 1 or 2 months. They need to do background checks. So I had no jobs for 1 or 2 months. So I took that time to study for the boards. And I went to a board review course in Baltimore, Maryland. That's when all the ER doctors are together for a conference to learn how to pass a board exam. And I wanted to prove to everyone who didn't believe in me that I was going to pass on my first attempt. It's like passing the bar. And I ran into someone that recognized my name on my jacket. I didn't know who he was. I thought he was somebody else. I confused him for some other person. So mixed multiple identities. But he recognized my name on the jacket. He's like, I know you. And he asked me, have you ever volunteered for the marathon before? And I said, yeah, as a resident, I'm one of the 5,000 volunteers every year that come. He's like, I know your name because you come every year. He said, try again. Most volunteers do 1 or 2 years and they stop. I did it every year for 3 to 4 years. So he remembered me. He's like, I'm the medical director of the New York City Marathon and I need a medical captain.
Wow.
And I was like, I just graduated residency. I think you need someone with more experience. He's like, no, I really need somebody. And he's like, I need someone for the Bronx 10 mile. In like 2 weeks. Can you do it? And I was like, I just graduated. Like, are you sure you want someone in charge who has no experience other than just in training? He's like, I just need somebody. So I showed up. And that race had a cardiac arrest. 23-year-old kid at the finish line dropped dead. Oh. And they picked him up and carried him to me. And that was my first shift, my first patient, like the critical patient. And the medical director, Dr. Weiss, he comes out of the race command. He's like, points to me. He's like, he's in charge. And apparently I didn't know this at the time. They had not had a cardiac arrest at the Bronx 10 mile for years.
So this is the first.
And everyone's looking at me and they've never met me before. They know I'm green and fresh faced. And the first thing I said, and everyone's yelling because they never had a cardiac arrest, especially for a young kid. So I told everyone to, in the nicest language I can say, but I can't say in your podcast, ask everyone shut up. Mm-hmm. I controlled the room and I just did the thing. It was just like habit because I did have training. And after 2 shocks, we brought the kid back.
Oh my God.
And he was moving and everyone started clapping and then they sent him off and everyone's just like, okay, we can trust you. And
that's a miracle. Did you hear that? New doctor, never been in a race before and a cardiac arrest for the first time in this Brooklyn race.
It was in the Bronx.
Yeah, Bronx.
But the week after was the Brooklyn race, and I had another cardiac arrest, and I saved him. Saved her. It was a woman. And then the week after that was the Staten Island half marathon. It was another cardiac arrest. At this point, everyone in New York Roadrunner was like, "Who is this kid? Is he causing these cardiac arrests, or is he saving them?" And it was just total random flukes. It's like we never had 3 in a row, and I saved all 3. Finally, a month later, when we were doing the New York City Marathon orientation for all the volunteers, a guy, a tap on my shoulder. And by this point, Dr. Weiss is asking me to speak for the orientation because he's like, this is I found this guy. And he's going to be your medical captain.
Right.
As I got the job really quickly. I get a tap on my shoulder. I'm feeling all this imposter syndrome. And I got a tap on my shoulder. I turn around and he's like, hey, Dr. Sun, I'm so-and-so. I'm not going to say his name. I'm the guy that you saved at the Bronx 10 mile. You saved my life. And I lost it. And what happened was he was supposed to run the New York City Marathon, but because of the incident, we saved his life. He gave up his spot to somebody else and decided to sign up as a medical volunteer on my medical team.
And he was just a volunteer. He's not a doctor.
He's not. I can't tell his job. He's part of
but
medical.
But he just volunteered.
He gave up his marathon spot, something that people look forward to doing for the rest of their lives. He gave it up just so he can volunteer with us because on my team.
Yes.
A couple of weeks later. So that's my first doctor job.
Oh my goodness gracious. That is wonderful. It's almost like, you were blessed. You were blessed because you were not supposed to be a doctor.
I was not supposed to be there.
And so you have given life to 3 people. Wow.
Something is out there.
Yes. The magic touch. Yeah. Or you're just favored by God.
We just have to have faith. I mean, I just had a recent health scare 4 months ago. Same thing. something out there wants me around for a little longer.
So tell us, if you can, tell us about it. 4 months ago, what happened?
4 months ago, I had a random thought come through my head. And it's the same kind of thought. I was like, oh, I should go check out this cafe. I mean, you walk into the cafe and you run to a friend. Same kind of thought. That thought was, wouldn't it be crazy if you had cancer this whole time? And I was like, why am I thinking these things? It's like usually I have happy thoughts, or I need to go to the gym today, or I should eat some breakfast. Random thought, another random thought. And I'm very intuitive. I trust myself. I can't explain to you why. It's the same thing as a doctor. You after enough experience, sometimes you can't explain what a patient is going through, but you know it's something, and you put them on a pathway to progress. Even though you don't have all the answers, you'll find out that what you did in the beginning, you shoot first, ask questions later, you are right. And all the tests prove that you are right. The heuristics or just gestalt. And I did it to myself. And I was like, I'm having these thoughts. I should check it out. And on a shift and around, I did a scan on myself. And the first thing I looked, I saw a huge tumor in my kidney.
Oh my God.
Or a mass. And I wasn't surprised.
This was in the hospital.
This was 4 months ago.
4 months ago.
I was seeing patients.
Oh my God.
And I wasn't surprised. I was like, I knew it. That was the reaction that surprised me. My reaction was not a surprise. That's what was surprising. When I saw it, I wasn't like, oh no, what's going on? What is this? I didn't think that. I was more like, I knew it.
Something within you had told you.
So I got another scan that did checked the whole thing, and it was like, yep, this is real. And even a radiologist confirmed it. And then within a week, I saw a surgeon, and he's like, can I see you in 3 months to take it out? And I was like, no, I want to see you tomorrow. And he goes, well, that's not an option, but okay, since you ask, because no one really asks, I'll see you tomorrow. 4 p.m., last case of the day. So I showed up. He goes like, hey, by the way, I'm just going to take out the small piece just to tell you what it is, because it could be fine. And then he goes under, I go in anesthesia, my first surgery. I wake up, and I was like, what happened? And they were like, he changed the plan. He decided to take out your whole kidney. And he had his own intuition. He's like, I don't know what it was. When I went in, I had to scrub out, get a second doctor to take a look. And he's the chair of urology at Mount Sinai.
So the top
he's
guy.
not someone that gets help. He's like, I needed help. So he had a second attending look at it. And they decided to take out my whole kidney. They didn't know why. They just knew they had to do it. And then a week later, I get a phone call from him. He's like, how did you know? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, how'd you know this was cancer? And I was like, I didn't. That's your job. So the pathology report came back, and it's a very aggressive, malignant type of cancer that's supposed to kill young people within weeks. And are you sure you never had any symptoms? And I was like, look, you checked my blood, you checked my urine, you checked everything, and everything's normal. And you even wrote that I had no symptoms. I maybe had back pain on my left side, but the tumor was the front part of my right kidney. So it doesn't even make sense correlator-wise. And I had that back pain for 5 years, and I've done scans of myself for teaching residents and medical students. It was never in my kidney before in the last 5 years. So he's just like, I don't understand it, but you just saved your own. Whatever possessed you to do that scan, you just saved your own life.
All right. For guys, for those listening, follow your instinct. Why? Because God is within us.
Yeah.
All right. And so there was something within you that this thought came, you may have cancer? Is that what the thought was?
Yeah, it's like, would it be crazy if you had cancer this whole time? And I just had to listen to it.
Wow.
And then 2 weeks after that, I found out my surgeon's father was my first boss 21 years ago when I was 16 years old at Mount Sinai. And then at an event...
Coincidence or serendipity or no coincidence?
And I think what you're doing is very powerful when you tell your audience to trust their own intuition. You are saving lives right now, because I want to do the same thing after my cancer scare. So I immediately told the story at an event I do a lot of public speaking. And one guy comes up to me. He's like, I was going to leave, but your story compelled me. I just need to know who your surgeon was. And I was like, why? Do you have something wrong? He's like, I just give him his name. He's like, give me his name. And I was like, okay. So I gave him his name, and he goes, that's my brother. This is literally a month after 3 weeks after the surgery.
Yes.
And then my brother calls me, and he goes, this is crazy. Your surgeon's father was your first boss at Mount Sinai, and our father knew him and was doing research for cancer that was funding his lab that you were working in. But you did not know this. So you can say this whole time your late father, your father who died, actually saved your life.
My goodness gracious. Yes, yes. You're blessed. Why? Because you listen to your inner guidance.
And
All
believing
right?
that something out there, even if they're no
Yes.
longer with us, is guiding to a
Guide.
path that has true consequential things that's happening with you. This is not just conjecture or theory. These are all real things that happen, real people that are connected if you choose to believe in that.
Okay. If you choose to believe, but really if you choose to listen,
Yeah.
they listen. So they may be gone, but they are still present. There is no destroying of life. There's another dimension where our loved ones are there and still guiding us. And you are the perfect example that all of these things were connected. Yes,
And
you are.
You have to choose it though. It's a choice. So everyone who's listening, you have that ability to harness that power within you.
Superpower. Yes, God's power within us. But we have to listen. And with yours, it's a very heightened, you have a very heightened sensitivity of knowing, what is within you. Yes, authenticity. Be authentic to yourself. That's terrific.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for letting me share that.
Yes. All right. So you said you followed your father's advice of writing every day? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And can I have here a book by Dr. Calvin Sun, and it's called The Monsoon.
The Monsoon Diaries.
The Monsoon Diaries. Okay. Can you just give a background of why it's called Diaries and why it's called Monsoon?
So when I first started traveling after the trip to Egypt, I decided to make that a habit because I started to realize the power what travel can do to the brain, to your life. A recent health article came out, study, that shows that traveling frequently is actually healthy for you. It keeps your brain young. It forces you to have new experiences. And I wanted to create a habit out of traveling, but that's when medical school also started. So what I did was I tried to create a lifestyle where every month, every couple months, I would leave the country on a budget, trying to save as much money as possible so I could travel and write every day how I was doing it. And it became a habit where every month for the last 14 years, I would travel, where a community started creating around those diaries.
So you would send it to the internet? How is that?
I was sending to the internet. So at the time this was happening, I had watched Monsoon Wedding and the Motorcycle Diaries back to back. And I just started creating the Monsoon Diaries out of that. I wanted to write every day, but travel like a monsoon, where this natural weather pattern, like a monsoon, brings about the harvest. People celebrate when the monsoon happens because it brings food and it's good for a good harvest season. And it's quick, like it rains really heavily and then it leaves. And that's the way we were traveling. I was trying to fit it in within a medical school schedule, knowing that it was not an expense, it was an investment. And what was happening was that other people were reading my blog and asking if they'd come along and started paying me to take them along on my trips. And originally I told them to go away, but because of that authenticity, they would be more encouraged to still try to follow along.
So they're tagging along. When you travel, you have others with you.
It was like Forrest Gump.
My goodness gracious. But, okay, so another lesson that you are saying is that going to Egypt, she said no at the first time.
Yeah.
But when he went there, he found how wonderful it was. So for those who are listening, when there is something in front of you, an opportunity, don't say no. You never know what it is until you try it. Is that more or less what happened to you?
If you build it, they will come.
If you build it, they will come. Oh my God, field of dreams.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And
yes.
Then the pandemic happened. And when that travel got shut down, when the travel ban took effect, I didn't stop writing. I definitely stopped traveling. That's unethical. I started working really hard and started working in every emergency room in New York that needed doctors. I started writing as if it was an adventure I didn't sign up for. It was just the same habit of traveling to other places and writing about it. This time I could no longer travel. I didn't stop doing something that fed my soul. I pivoted to write about this new experience of a pandemic we were all traveling through for the first time. Not something that we wanted to go to, not a destination but we had no choice but collectively share this trauma
Collectively,
together.
we were individual, but yet suffering from the same situation.
Right? And we were exploring it together, just like me and my group of friends, exploring a new country together. But that was by choice. This one, we had no choice. But at least we could choose how to explore it, how to understand it. And I was writing it, my blog, my travel blog, which then, because of the existing following, was now hooked in about what was going on in our emergency rooms in the height of the pandemic in New York City. And then during the lockdown, more people started following along. And that's when I ended up on a lot of news agencies. And the irony, because I didn't have a full-time job at one hospital like all my friends did, I was working at many different hospitals. I was the only one that could speak the truth of what was going on without getting in trouble. So when news agencies would interview me, it's like, what's going on? It's like, we're running out of masks. We're all dying. Doctors are dying. All hospitals don't have enough PPE. They're not putting enough money. We're wearing garbage bags. They would try to search, which hospital do you work in? I was like, I don't know. I worked at 4 different hospitals yesterday. I don't even remember what I ate for breakfast. Look me up. Google me. And they would try to Google which hospitals I worked in. And you see a list of 20 hospitals. You can't fit that in a byline. So it was like New York City Hospital, ER doctor. And therefore I couldn't be traced to one hospital. So when I went to work, one doctor would get fired for violating the media clause, because when you looked that person up, you find out one hospital they worked in because they're a full-time doctor at that hospital. With me, you couldn't find it. So medical directors would fire someone and then turn to me. It's like, I love what you said on the media, because no one could trace you to us, because what you're seeing is it's affecting all the hospitals. So now we're getting donations of PPE, so we don't have to pay for it, which is truly horrific. But it was like a win-win situation where I was able to speak truth to power, be authentic, not be political, and create actual good progress and change for the doctors that were suffering, my colleagues, to get the PPE they needed that the hospitals didn't supply us enough with, while also getting to take care of myself and not get fired, to protect myself. And that led to all the writings that when the pandemic started calming down, I was approached by literary agents to publish everything that I've already written into a memoir, hence the Monsoon Diaries.
Okay, so that's the Monsoon Diaries. Not that you were traveling, okay? A doctor's journey of hope and healing from the ER frontlines to the far reaches of the world. All right, so this is the result of this book. So all of this came off sort of naturally.
It's an investment into yourself, into your intuition of the natural things that you don't plan. It's like the Steve Jobs quote, like, it doesn't make sense when you're trying to connect the dots moving forward, but when you look back and then connect the dots, it makes perfect sense. I didn't know at the time I wanted to travel. I didn't know I was going to travel as much as I did during med school. Just do your best. I didn't even know if I wanted to be a doctor. But now I've become a doctor. Everything my dad wanted me to be. But I became my own version of a doctor in my own terms. It's not about what you become. It's how you get there. That's the story. It's not the destination. It's the journey. And I became a doctor still. So my dad's happy I'm a doctor. But I became a doctor who's traveled to 150 countries before I became an attending.
150 countries. How did you manage that while you're studying?
70 during med school, 80 during residency. Because I just made it a habit. I would study on the airplane. If you study in different environments, you remember the material better, ironically. I didn't know that at the time.
If you are studying in somewhere else and not in your not in your desk, in your
same
bed,
desk. You start to blur if you stay in one place. If you move your study locations around,
you're more focused.
You're more focused. Your brain is fresh. Your brain starts attaching things to different areas. So when you recall things on an exam, you're like, oh yeah, I was here when I learned this material. I was there when I learned material. So actually, I wasn't the best student, but I was passing. And P equals MD in medical school. And then in residency, by the time I was able to talk to patients, since I traveled to so many places, I was able to be culturally competent to connect them in their language. So I speak many different languages and phrases, but I also knew how to communicate with them to have them trust me. So for example, if a patient comes in with a stroke or what they think is a stroke, and everyone's like, oh my God, he can't speak, he has a stroke, he's not responding. Where are you right now? And the guy's like, confused?
Yes.
I would know because I traveled, or I can understand the kind of language that he goes. He's like, he doesn't speak English. He speaks this language that no one knows. And I asked him in that language, because I just was traveled there like a few weeks ago, and he would respond back. He's like, yeah, I just don't speak English. I'm not having a stroke. I'm here for a cough. But he was about to get a CAT scan, a CAT scan, an angio, IVs, a stroke team was going to come down. Other patients would have been, taken away from their care because of the stroke code. And the whole time, people thought, oh, because he doesn't speak English, he must be having strokes. Like, no, some people don't speak English. Some people are immigrants and speak other languages, and they just look confused when they're yelling at them in English, in a language they don't understand. And sometimes you have to have the sensitivity as a different kind of doctor to realize, oh, this seems off. This is not a stroke. This is just a cultural competency issue. And that during residency and during med school, those things are what made me stand out and led me to become, I guess, a doctor that sees patients in a different way than from the books.
Yes, and also that you're the perfect person to be an emergency, because it's not just dealing with children or dealing with brain cancer or dealing with cancer. It's the whole humanity, sort of.
I see the entire city in my emergency room on a daily basis.
Exactly. Well, that's one example where the guy is just having a cough and everybody thought simply because. Is there any other example where there was somebody who also does not speak English and is being misdiagnosed?
Yeah, there was
until you said, that he sounds like.
Yeah, there was. There are two. There was a woman that they thought was hit by a car, so she came for a trauma, and no one could communicate with her, and she was screaming in a language they didn't understand. And since I had just been to her country, I responded to her immediately in that language because I understood it. And she was like, "No, I was a bystander, and
not hit by a car.
I was not hit by a car, and I'm pregnant." So they were about to CAT scan her with all this radiation that she didn't need unless you talked to them.
You saved her life again.
Saved her and the kid's life from unnecessary radiation. There was another patient that was in a hospital for like months because he spoke a dialect of Chinese no one understood, that none of the language hotlines could translate. And they just gave up and decided to keep him in the hospital until his family could come and communicate the treatment plan to him, which is the right thing to do. You don't want to discharge someone without the right instructions, but they had to wait for his family, who were working class, to come at a specific time of the week when they could come all the way to the Bronx, South Bronx, to talk to him. And it only had like an hour or two before they had to leave. And it was a complicated treatment process and a treatment plan. And the months that he was there, he became eventually stable to take care of. So they just assigned it to all the young doctors, the intern. I was the first year resident, which is the first year out of medical school, just to hold on to, babysit him essentially, knowing that I could not communicate with him. And I speak Mandarin Chinese, but he did not speak Mandarin. So I walked into
It was a dialect of another.
It's a very random dialect no one could speak, and none of the translation lines could figure out. So when I walked in the room, they all were like, "Good luck," and it was to haze me. And I thought this was disrespectful to the patient, disrespectful to me. So I walked in and I looked at him and I was, at least let me try. Always try and try again, as you said.
Yes.
I was like, I'm going to speak to a Mandarin. Obviously, it didn't work. He was looking at me confused. And it was the way he was wearing his clothes and the way he was his mannerisms that I decided to try something different. I speak Spanish because I grew up in New York. I learned Spanish in high school. So I was like, hola, ¿cómo está? And he responded immediately, muy bien, ¿y tú? I was like, usted habla español? I was like, yo habla español. And I was like, and then he used to tell me his life story that he grew up in a neighborhood in Puerto Rico. And I was like, that's why I knew like I could figure it out because I'm in Puerto Rico. And the irony was the hospital doctors were mostly Spanish speaking.
And they couldn't
And they just overlooked that because they assumed an Asian looking person would never speak Spanish. They didn't even try. And that became a whole risk management issue where how did this young doctor within the first 5 minutes get this patient discharged with the right instruction plan, because now they could speak in a language they understand, in Spanish, when he was stuck there for months under the nose of all the doctors that could speak his language in the first time because of a bias.
Wow, Dr. Calvin, you have saved so many lives, and the two that you have explained.
I saved them a lot of money too.
You saved them a lot of money, yes, because he was there, and stabilized already, ready to be discharged.
Yeah, but that's a social determinant of health, like your ability to pay for healthcare, and his family did not know how to pay for those healthcare bills that he had to be in the hospital for. Obviously, because of this mistake, they were able to, I think, rectify that and waive all those hospital fees because they were able to discharge him had they bothered to check other languages he could speak.
Right.
And then,
Yes.
therefore, that's one less source of stress for the whole family. Imagine what that would be like to pay off those hospital bills or be
For 1
harassed
month.
by a collection agency.
Yes.
That will cause some heart attacks or health scares or chest pain and headaches that will lead them to come to the emergency room again. And that's another $1 million workup that they could have avoided
Yes.
simply by speaking someone's language.
Yes.
This is New York City.
Yes, wonderful, Dr. Calvin Son. Okay, so everybody, read his story, the Monsoon Diaries. The monsoon in Asia are rain that comes. You know, it helps this soil.
It brings about the harvest.
It brings about the harvest. It comes and goes, and then you can have harvest. So that's why it's called monsoon.
Yeah.
And diaries because he writes every time.
Yeah, right.
Wonderful stories.
Thank you.
Okay, this is from Justin N.
Hey,
It's-
Justin.
Yes, it's not often that a doctor runs for public office. What made you decide to run for the office of public advocate in New York City?
As an emergency room doctor, every day of our job is to take care of the people who are most desperate in New York. If you have nowhere else to go, you come to the emergency room. Even our shelters close at 7 p.m. and the emergency rooms never close. And for the past 10 years, I've seen the entire city in my emergency rooms, where right now, and for at least the past couple of years, and definitely the pandemic heightened it, majority of patients who come in the emergency rooms are because of policy failures out of our control, where a majority of my work is to tackle things that are way beyond what I learned in medical school. It's not just physical and mental health. I mean, that's the obvious. We do $1 million workup. I know what to do for that. That's what I'm trained for. But I also have to take care of their social welfare and their placement. Because there's one thing about saving someone's life, but then how do I make sure the treatment plan is in place so they don't come back again as an emergency room patient? Where are they going to go? How are they going to access their medicine? How do they make sure they have the means to focus on a treatment plan? Do they have a job that allows them to make money? Or to feel secure so they can focus on their health? Or do they have any food insecurity? What if they're there because of food insecurity? All the anxiety that leads people to come to our emergency rooms that manifests as chest pain or headache, like affording their homes. Because when you get to the root cause, once the emergency is stabilized, I get to speak with the patient and ask, what else is bothering you? Why do you have chest pain? Why do you have a headache once the heart attack is ruled out? And you'll find out the majority of the reasons are because of policy failures that are symbolic of a failure of government. Our emergency rooms are a failure of government. If our government actually did its job and made a more secure population, a population didn't have to worry about food insecurity or housing or their stress with their job or whether they can stay here every day when it's all survival mentality, then our emergency rooms and the hospitals will be free and clear of the majority of our patients. We all know that $1 million work, billions of dollars are spent to reassure the population because not everyone's having a heart attack, but they feel like they are. But these people then, once we stabilize in the emergency room and reassure them it's not a heart attack, it's not a stroke, they still have to see a neurologist and a cardiologist, which is why you have to wait weeks to months for a specialist when you don't have to if the government did its job. And if those billions of dollars can then be reinvested into other areas like startups and small businesses and affordable
And good
housing
education
and
and housing.
education and public safety, you realize that these are not disconnected policy errors. They're collective systemic drivers of poor health outcomes. And that's why I realized that I'm already doing the work of an elected official. I might as well just run for the position because I can see the city through a different lens and add to the conversation and could say how government neglect can directly impact vulnerable communities. It drives people to the edge. My friends can't even afford to live here anymore. Like, this is not the direction we want to go in. At the very least, if I'm already taking care of the city from a doctor's point of view, I can do so from a public official point of view with that medical training in the background, but also not just medical training, the training of accountability. I spent my entire life putting other people above myself. When I was a bartender, I took care of them better than I take care of myself. As a doctor, I've always put my patients first. We don't see that in our elected officials because career politicians have not had that training and accountability of putting people above themselves. And I think we need more of that. We deserve that in our elected office.
All right. Public advocate, Dr. Calvin Son. Very nice. From Jet T. What's your favorite travel experience so far and how many countries have you already visited?
Oh, Jet, Depends on what country you want to do. But as of the end of this January, I would have visited pretty much every country in the world. 247 currently, according to a count that tracks the most well-traveled people in the world. I don't count. There are 3 lists out there whose duty is to track your countries and how many you've been. Because what we do is we provide resources to lesser travel places. My favorite travel experience is all of them. I can't choose among favorites with my children, if you will, of countries I've been to. But I would say that India is the country I've been to the most because every day I have a story and I spend, collectively months there. Philippines has a special place in my heart. I'm not saying that because that was the first country I traveled to in the Monsoon Diaries. When I created my blog, the first country I went to was the Philippines because I wanted to see Batad, the rice terraces, with my own eyes. The first country that I traveled alone was Egypt, and the first country I traveled, but not alone with friends, was India. So they all have those 3 have the special places in my heart. But every place I go, I always go in with the expectation of no expectation that they might be my next favorite.
Lovely. And so how many, you said you have visited 100?
So 247 countries and territories.
Oh my God, 247.
If you want to go by the UN count, 186.
All right. So those who have not traveled, please listen to Dr. Calvin's son. So from Jen N, how is your approach to the public advocate's office different from other candidates who have run in the past? Oh, well.
Just answer that. Other candidates in the past who have run are career politicians who have one way of doing things. It's a culture. I don't think we've had, but there is an appetite for a candidate that has come from a background where they have engaged in service to the city from the very first day of their careers for at least a decade. Doctors, teachers, you need more of those. People who have been in the trenches, who created a habit of being accountable to others, teachers to their students, doctors to their patients, and putting that in the role where they just seamlessly transition. Just like I did, how does a bartender have to do with being a doctor? And the doctor that was interviewing me, he's like, that was the best answer I've ever heard to the question. I see the connection because you sold it. Because when you first said bartending, I was kind of confused, but you made sense to it. I'm just transitioning doctor to an elected official, which I think is a easier connect than a bartender to doctor. A doctor puts people above themselves as an elected official should put above themselves. And every public advocate in the past, it's a mercurial position. It is what you make of it. Bill de Blasio used his public advocate, he was a public advocate, for social justice as a foil to Mayor Bloomberg at the time. And Letitia James, she is our current attorney general. She was a public advocate who used as a position of a litigator to prosecute slumlords and criminals and predators. I would be using it as a public health advocate to take care of the entire city and advocate on behalf as if it was to take care of a loved one. Let's say there are 350 neighborhoods in New York. I'm going to visit each and every one of them. I already work in all the neighborhoods and all the urgent care and emergency rooms. I'm going to take care of each and every neighborhood as if they were my own 350 patients, which I see in 3 days anyway. And each patient neighborhood has their own unique but similar problems and solutions. We approach them uniquely as if they're being heard and listened to, but there is a process in which we can take care of them when I see the trends that are similar, passing bills on their behalf or litigation to advocate for them. And finally, an emergency room doctor sees the entire city and then connects them to the right hospital services to advocate for the patient so that not only would we treat their emergency, but we prevent them from happening again once we connect them to the otolaryngologist or the right surgeon or the cardiologist, all of them advocating for them to get them from upstairs to downstairs to see my patient in the emergency room so they don't have to come back here again, so they have definitive care. That's the same as a public advocate. We take the entire city's complaints, just like an emergency room. We take the whole city and connect them to the right city agencies and services, advocating for them to prevent that problem they're coming in for from ever happening again.
All right.
Seamless transition.
That's it. Public advocate, emergency doctor. He can do it. All right. This is from JDV. Traveling while working in a high-stress profession is very rare. How do you manage to integrate both the travel and the profession?
Plan the fun things first. Prioritize your health because you cannot pour from an empty cup. And for me...
Wait, listen to that. You cannot pour from an empty cup. So you have to yourself be healthy.
Yeah.
All right.
If you build it, there will come in that if you build yourself, and you promote your own sources of joy, prioritize your own joy, the people you surround yourself with, the things that you do. And for me, that was travel. That was my love language. For you, it could be different. For you, it could be going to the gym or yoga or meditation. Everyone has their own love language. And for me, I stumbled upon travel and making that into a habit. And I would make budget travel because I was $300,000 in student loan debt. And part of the joy was to travel on a budget where I would actually spend less than what I would have spent if I stayed in New York. And that art is what led other students also in debt to still come on my trips because I was trying to show to them what was possible. Traveling the impossible was one of our slogans. And by enriching...
Traveling is...
Traveling the impossible. But
traveling the impossible.
And traveling is an investment into yourself.
Right. Yes.
And why I traveled so much was because I wanted to see where all of New York City was coming from. Why was every country in the world wanting to call New York their home? I just don't understand it because I'm a born and raised New Yorker. New York is already my home. So to me, that's all I knew. I'm kind of spoiled in that sense. It's like, oh, New York is just another city. It's not. It's the only city where the entire world have representatives who want to live in New York and call it their new home. And that's why I travel to every country in the world because I'm so curious where the origins of the majority of New York immigrants come from and what their stories that led them to my very own hometown, to connect them together in a full circle. And that, to me, was the very essence of what made me into a better medical student and a better doctor. So it's not about two mutually exclusive concepts. It's things that are complementary that cannot exist without the other. I would not have survived medical school if I didn't travel because medical school it was very stressful and travels the only thing that could reset my mental health to when I came back to med school again, I was able to fresh and then just study because I was young. I'm younger in my 20s. The physical health was tired, but the mental health was excited. It's like, I just did this in the last 48 hours. I can study this. But also the medical school part, because so little free time is left, that created the fire under me to travel as much as I could. They could not exist without each other. It's the yin and the yang.
Wonderful. Oh my God. Okay, this is the last question from Jeremy A. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be? Your younger self.
Your dad is so proud of you.
Oh, that's
I just want you to know that.
That's wonderful.
Your dad has been always, and he's never told you that, but I just want that little me to know that. Never question that because I don't think, I never grew up with him. He was in Connecticut. He told me he was proud one time, and that was a week before he died. Yeah. And I do believe that if you have a loved one who says things and they just know something's going to happen, it's going to come out. And I think it really did come out because he knew deep down that he was going to die really soon. Mm. And I think he spoke to a younger version of me that he never got to connect with. And I think he felt like he repeated a mistake in his life again when he couldn't connect with my brother. And it's just a cycle. And I'm here to break that cycle if I can go back to tell my younger self to not live in that fear, to not live in that self-doubt, and to know that you are loved and you're not alone. And yes, you did grow up alone. Your mom was never around. Your dad was never around, but they are so proud of you. And just know, if you can redo your whole life again with that on your back, you would be a lot less anxious than you are right now. But I worked that out since.
That's lovely. That is lovely. He would have told himself, your father and mother are proud of you. Dr. Calvin San, thank you. Yeah. That is lovely.
Thank you.
All right, there you have it. The Loida Lewis Podcast. Let's live, love, laugh, and learn together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Galing. Ang ganda.
The Loida Lewis Podcast, hosted by Loida Lewis, is produced by the creators of Over a Glass or Two, Jesse and JV. Executive produced by Loida Nicolas Lewis. Rate and review us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for a chance to be featured on a future episode. Have a question for Miss Loida? Just email us on askloidalewis@gmail.com. Your question might make its way to a future episode. Subscribe on all major platforms to never miss a beat. Thank you for listening to the Loida Lewis Podcast. Let's live, love, laugh, and learn together